Okay, hey folks, back at it. My notes are here, so I may look down a time or two. So let's talk about the properties of silk. So before we dig into the properties of silk, we're going to go back and look at that fiber properties table that I uploaded at the beginning of the semester, and of course I told you to keep it on hand because we're going to use it for every fiber and fabric that we talk about. So look at that table when we're pull it out. So when we're talking about aesthetics, you kind of see where it compares. And then below this, since we just finished wool, below this video, after the video is over, I'm going to have a table that compares wool and silk. So let's dive in. So what are the aesthetics, right? The aesthetics are based in part on how the silk is produced. So silk does have a a range of different aesthetic properties. So and because of that, it is able to be used in a couple of different methods. So because of its many fabric types, so we talked about it when we talked about tussar silk and pony and wild silk and all the different ways that it can be woven too. We're going to talk about that as well. All the ways it can be woven. It has a variety of uses for both apparel and in home textiles. And that smooth, cultivated, texture, but then some of the irregularities that happen in some of the wild silk gives it a lot of end uses. And it's a lustrous. I don't know if that's a word. I'm going to change it. It's a fabric that has a lot of luster. I just made it a word, lustrous. It's a fabric that has a lot of luster. It's soft and sometimes it catches the light and it sparkles. It's very shiny. It looks like what it feels like. Sometimes it looks liquid and has a lot of movement and hand to it. And that luster that silk has been the model for the manufacture of many synthetic fibers and fabrics. People want to mimic the look of silk. And fabrics that are made of cultivated silk, again, they have that smooth appearance and luxurious hand. It's very soft, but it's not as slippery as many of its man-made synthetic counterparts. So I made a reference earlier in the previous slide about wild silks and the luster that silk has. And wild silks tend to be coarser because of their really irregular surface, and they do have a more pronounced texture. And in the filament form silk, and especially wild silks, they really have poor covering power. So again, refer to that properties chart. You should know the definition right now of covering. But silk does have poor covering power. And even though the silk filament itself is a really strong filament fiber, silk fabrics are often treated with a finish, right? And again, you should know that word finish, right? And in early silk production, metallic salts were used as a finish in a process that was called weighting. And weighting was to give the silk a heavier hand, in theory, actually in actuality, to produce a better drape. That finishing also helped absorb the types of dyes that were used at the time. So these were called weighted silks. And there's an image of a weighted silk garment here on your screen. And unfortunately, these weighted silks, they did not last. And so you see this poor sleeve of this garment is disintegrating just because of the excessive amounts of a finish of metallic salt that was put on top of the product. So finishings for natural fibers, but specifically for silk, can destroy it or exacerbate how quickly the garment will disintegrate. So silk does have really high durability, but it has some moderate abrasion resistance. And again, all these words you should know because of our table that we've been looking at. And in the end, um, silk is one of the strongest fiber used in part because it's one single long strand, right? That filament is a long strand, but it does lose some of its durability, some of its strength when it's wet. So when we get to talking about care too, we'll talk about why you shouldn't get you shouldn't get silk wet. But silk really is can be a durable fabric, especially if it's not treated with a bunch of finishes. So really, in its most natural state is when it is the most durable, and it does have quite a bit of flexibility and elasticity. So when you pull a silk garment, when you pull a silk filament, or you pull a silk garment out to its length, it will pop back into shape. So if you can't necessarily stretch out a silk garment, it will go back and retain its original shape.
All right, we're gonna go audio for the rest of the video. I told you it's really weird to see yourself lecturing. So we're gonna go with video, audio for the rest of this section. So let's talk about comfort, right? So silk does have high comfort and it has high absorbency. It retains moisture fairly well, but it does develop static cling. So static cling does happen mostly because it's a really smooth fiber and yarn, and obviously the fabric as well is fine, and it doesn't have a very heavy weight, so motion will cause static cling. Silk fabrics are generally comfortable in the summer because they're so lightweight. And like wool, they're a poor conductor of heat. Um, so they can be worn in the winter, but usually as a layering piece. They're obviously not as warm as wool, but they can be used as the layering piece. So the weight of a fabric is important in its heat conductivity, and since silks tend to be sheer, they are cool. Um, Whereas wool is going to be warm. Underneath this section of the lecture, there is a table that compares the performance of silk and wool in terms of these properties that we're talking about now. So, silk products are generally lightweight, and we talked about weighted silks a couple of ago, but weighted silks aren't, as I stated, as durable as regular silks, and they tend to wrinkle more easy. So care, and much like wool and in the luxury animal fibers that we looked at, you have to dry clean silk. There are some washable versions, but generally because of the yarn type and the dyes that are used in silk that have poor color fastness, the product construction methods pretty much require for silk to be laundered, to be dry cleaned. Laundered silk can use a mild detergent and a gentle agitation, but even washable silks should be washed by hand. So, care has to be taken with silk because once it gets wet, it loses a bit of its strength, and it tends to in the washing process, hand washing process, it tends to wrinkle in the wringing out of the water. So, you know, um, silk is dry clean only. That's the best thing to say. Silk is dry clean only. Silks do tend to water spot as well, so that's part of the reason why they're dry clean only, because the washing process can change the color fastness of it, essentially change the color of the garment, because they do water spot. So before hand or machine washing, there should be some color fastness test done to an underside or a corner of the garment to make sure that it's going to maintain that process. And some soaps and detergents may cause yellowing again, that or the color to remove. So it's really important to follow the care instructions, to follow those care instructions to the T. And we looked at weighted silks at the top of this lecture, and we see how they disintegrate. And that dress that we saw was a historical a dress from the 18th century that was in storage in a museum and cared for to maintain its historical identity, and it's still disintegrated because of the finish that was put on it. And unfortunately, this is known that weighted garment is known as what's known as a shattered silk, because the silk just disintegrated because of the finish that was put on it, not because of how it was taken care of. The next thing we're going to talk about is sustainability in silk production. We've talked about the poor little the poor little moths not making it through the process, but there's some good things on the sustainability side. There's a couple more challenges, but there's some good things on the sustainability side as well.